Hello, everyone. I'm Deborah Vagans, the National Campaign Director and the Director of Equal Pay Today with Equal Rights Advocates. Thank you for joining our webinar, Pay Equity is Power, Advocating for Native Women's Economic Justice. We're holding this conversation with some incredible leaders to continue the conversation around Native Women's Equal Pay Day, which was November 21st this year. I'd like to start by acknowledging the indigenous peoples of all the lands that we're on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands we each call home. I am joining our meeting from Washington, D.C. on the land of the Piscataway and the Anacostan. I want to thank our incredible speakers who I will introduce in a moment and the amazing Equal Rights Advocates team, Jess, Guillermo, and Nooper, who are all producing and supporting this webinar, and our executive director, Noreen Farrell. Equal Pay Today is a project of Equal Rights Advocates. We are a nationwide campaign bringing together local, state, tribal, and national groups and supporters across the country to close race and gender wage gaps, accelerate fair pay progress state by state, and drive federal policy reform. Each year, we publish a policy agenda identifying key pieces of state and federal legislation and federal executive branch action that will address the multiple drivers of the pay gap, from pay inequity to lack of paid leave to occupational segregation to workplace harassment and violence. We also organize equal pay days around the year, including marking the egregious pay disparities experienced by women of color. We hold public education events like today that we hope you will join, and we also litigate, and I encourage you to get in touch with us if your employment rights have been violated, and we will get you in touch with the right folks. Native Women's Equal Pay Day and this webinar have been organized by Return to the Heart Foundation, the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women Lead, Not Our Native Daughters, and the Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Network, along with Equal Pay Today. So just a couple more things, because I don't want to keep you too long from our amazing panel. So we are raising awareness and shining a light on the fact that Native women working full-time year-round only make 58 cents on the dollar as compared to non-Hispanic white men. And worse still, when you look at all Native women earners, they only make 52 cents in comparison to all non-Hispanic white male earners, one of the most significant wage disparities in the United States. If you break it down by tribal nation, some Native American women are paid even less. So Native women face higher rates of poverty, unemployment, and violence due to the ongoing and long-lasting impacts of colonialism, genocide, the taking of the land, and state-sanctioned violence on Native communities. Low pay, discrimination, economic abuse, and lack of employment protections all play a part in why Native women continue to struggle under such huge wage disparities. So our experts today will reflect more deeply on that. Because of our packed agenda, we will certainly fill the time with our incredible speakers' presentations. But if you have any questions for our speakers, my colleague Guillermo is going to drop into the chat a Google document if you would like to ask questions, and we will follow up with you after the webinar. Today, we'll be talking about some of the federal policy pending in the U.S. Congress that would help, including the Paycheck Fairness Act, which would modernize and strengthen the Equal Pay Act of 1963, the Healthy Families Act, which would set a national standard of 7 paid sick and safe days, the Family Act, which would provide workers with up to 12 weeks of partial income for family and medical leave, and the Be Heard Act, which is comprehensive legislation to address workplace harassment. Now, finally, let me introduce our incredible panelists who will be discussing the contributors to the pay disparities, their devastating impact on Native women and families, and a deeper dive into some of the data, statistics, stories, and solutions. Guillermo will be dropping in their organization's contact information so you can learn more about their organizations and check out their websites. So today, we are joined by Gina Jackson with the Return to the Heart Foundation. Gina is Western Shoshone and Oglala Lakota. She is the co-CEO of the Return to the Heart Foundation, which she co-founded in 2020. Gina's philanthropic experience includes Native Americans in Philanthropy and the Casey Foundation, serving as an IPA at the Assistant Secretary's Office of the Interior before joining the Obama White House's Community Solutions team during the last year of the administration. She has more than 20 years of experience encompassing state and tribal justice, collaboration, policy, and philanthropy. Next, we have Vernell Chase, the board chair of Native Women Lead. Vernell is also the director of tribal relations and business development for Flintco. She has worked for Flintco for 30 years, where she has gained and maintained extensive knowledge in the construction industry and tribal relationship building through Indian country. Vernell is the board chair for the American Indian Chamber of Commerce of New Mexico, board member of the Fort Belknap Investment Board, board member of Laguna Development Corporation. And Vernell is an enrolled member of the Gros Ventre tribe and of Assiniboine and the Mandan descent, and of Assiniboine and Mandan descent from Fort Belknap, Montana. Lynette Gray Bull is a nationally recognized advocate, survivor, and subject matter expert with over 13 years of dedicated work to end crises of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and human trafficking within Indigenous communities. As the founder and executive director of Not Our Native Daughters, a national organization addressing these urgent issues, Lynette leads transformative campaigns, supports affected families, and provides critical training to strengthen tribal responses and public safety. Her work spans a variety of Indigenous issues, from traditional ecological knowledge and environmental justice to grant writing and project development, always grounded in a mission to empower tribal communities. Ruth Buffalo is the CEO of the Minnesota Indians Women's Resource Center. She is a dedicated public health professional and community advocate. As a citizen of the Mandan and Hidatsa and Arikara Nation and a descendant of the Chiricahua Apache, Ruth has spent over 25 years championing healthy and safe communities. Her diverse expertise includes serving on advisory councils focused on women's health, women's leadership development, and local food systems. A former North Dakota lawmaker, Ruth authored significant legislation addressing the public safety, human trafficking, and prevention of missing and murdered Indigenous persons. Finally, last but not least, Charlotte Gonzalez is the Policy and Advocacy Director at the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women. She proudly identifies as a Navajo woman from Waterflow, Farmington, New Mexico, and as a Pueblo woman from San Ildefonso, Pueblo. Charlotte's academic journey, combined with her lived experiences, cultivated a strong commitment to policy change and advocacy for underrepresented communities. Her passion for justice was further fueled by her work supporting victims of domestic violence. Charlotte was invited to serve as the Restorative Justice Director with La Plata County DA's office, and in this role, she implemented innovative practices that significantly reduced recidivism rates in La Plata County. Okay, what an incredible lineup. Let me just get straight to the questions now. And I'm going to ask you these questions, and I hope each of you will start by telling our audience a bit more about your organizations. I didn't do it justice. And then feel free to launch into your answer. So let me start with Gina. Welcome back, Gina. Thank you for joining us again this year. I know that you recently published a fantastic blog on Native women and economic justice. I'm hoping that you could share with this audience more about that article, maybe some data and some stories and the root causes of the disparities.
Uhagani, thank you so much having me here again today. Return to the Heart Foundation was created from a dream of gender equality for Native women and girls. And there's so many different layers to that fight for justice. But our organization empowers and resources, and by resources, I mean funding, grants, Indigenous women who are bringing holistic healing to their communities and beyond. And then through this work, cultivating a world where Indigenous women and girls are valued, protected, supported, and where Mother Earth can thrive for future generations. Now, by doing that, we are uplifting and rematriating Indigenous values. We are reclaiming ancestral spirituality, culture, knowledge, respect for Mother Earth, and centering as we resource Native women's roles in leadership. Our areas of focus are climate justice, narrative change, economic and restorative development, civic engagement, and our newest efforts are focused on missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. We actually have a grant that's open right now that folks can learn about on our website, Return to Heart, Return number two, heart.org, and learn more about the fund. And if you're interested, apply. And if you're interested in supporting, support us. So let me go ahead and just get started. I recently wrote a blog in collaboration and partnership with some good friends at the National Partnership for Women and Families, as well as a data fact sheet. But I wanted to really just kick us off today. We didn't get in this situation just haphazardly. It just didn't happen to us. All of the issues that we're facing today as Native women, as Native people, really come from the foundation of colonization and genocide of our people, which is much unacknowledged. I mean, we're taking some baby steps, and there's certain states that have actually said, yes, we acknowledge the genocide to the Native people, but it's not something that's been widespread talked about. It's not something that's taught in our U.S. mainstream education systems. It's very glossed over, but it is the root cause, and it is something that is so important to talk about today, because we just didn't get here by any kind of accident. It was strategic to undermine our power as Native women, whether that's on the political realm, the economic realms, in any type of area. So as we are fighting and believing and holding on to the values in our society today, general values of justice, of equality, we also have the layer of our Indigenous values that we are holding tight to. While we have lost so much, we have not lost our values, and that is what's going to bring us back. So as we are looking at why, how, what, one of the first things that I think about is when you look at the disparities and you look at the design of how far we've come. I want to first acknowledge that we are still here, and while the our populations have dwindled, some would say even 90+% in the last census. From 2010 to 2020, we grew. So 2010 being close to 2% of the population, to 2020 to being 3%. So we are coming back. But back to the root causes. So there's systemic policies, systemic biases that have been laid down as a foundation. And as we go through and we are working to overcome, all of these issues of oppression, I have to mention a few things. One is the removal of our children. Native residential boarding schools caused such havoc on our families, on our people. Every single Native person that that you meet that is not fluent in their language, it is because of these residential schools that took children and broke, families. And then even after schools were starting to die down, then there was a child welfare crisis. And it's still going on today with disproportionate numbers of children being removed from their families and homes and their communities. So taken out of their whole communities and placed with folks who don't have the same culture, the same values, and are not valuing these kids. Higher educational barriers often hinder Native women from obtaining college degrees. And the sad thing is, even with college degrees, that disparity that's not the only solution. We still have to fight for or equity in pay. Another issue is the violence, not just faced outside the workplaces, but inside the workplaces. And let me just drop this one statistic. 40% of all human trafficking victims are Native women in the US. 40%. How can that be? If we're only if we're 3% of the population are Native, half of that would be women, on a guess. How could we be 40%? We are being targeted. And so this is a real systems justice issue that we need to talk about. And it is related to, all of the factors. We're not, in silos. And when you look at, these issues and the root causes and how we can find solutions, we have to acknowledge Why? Why are we here? Because if we just jump to like, oh yeah, there's lots of problems, we're never really truly healing from those initial wounds that have caused us, not just as Native women, but as a country to be in, such crisis, especially racial crisis. So I just wanted to share that. And then let me just drop into the chat, Guillermo, if you wouldn't mind. I want to give a state by state look at these disparities. And I would ask you as a listener participating in this webinar, find your state and see where are what does the gap look like in your state. I'm coming to you from Nevada, actually on the lands of the Pyramid Lake Paiute people in a tiny little border town called Fernley, Nevada. And when I look at these numbers, it is worse than the national average. And so, you know, we're going to have a question later about solutions, but I want you to keep that number in mind, because really on a local level, there's national things, right, that we're all working towards, but also on a local level, on a state level, what is the situation and what are some things that you can do? Just put that seed in the back of your mind as we go through these presentations and we come to, an end where we are able to talk solutions.
Thank you, Gina. That's, very important, very serious. And we're so glad that you are in the fight, working on these and identifying the issues. I want to turn next to Lynette. So, again, please talk a little bit about your organization, the work that you're doing, and also picking up on what Gina said. It's important that we dig deeper on some of these pay disparities. And so maybe you could tell us a little bit more about the educational and regional differences in the pay gap for Native women.
Mhm. Yes, the Tonka Kuye, Ananana, Nakase, Nech, Hihani, Mini. Greetings. My traditional name is Morning Water. I greeted you in both my Lakota and Northern Arapaho language. My name is Lynette Grable. Again, I'm Hunkpapa, a Lakota from the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe, and also Northern Arapaho from the Wind River Reservation. I'm honored to join you all today for this vital conversation on pay equity and economic justice for Native women. I am the executive director of Not Our Native Daughters, a national nonprofit committed to addressing the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women and relatives and human trafficking of Indigenous people. Through our work, we provide technical assistance, support to impacted families, education to foster inclusivity for Indigenous voices, and discussions of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Another initiative I am proud of is a program that we have called Indigenous Youth Voices. We work with Native youth from 15 to about 20, 27, 28 years old, which focuses on empowering Native youth by creating pathways into conservation, environmental justice, climate change, and outdoor recreation careers. We integrate traditional ecology knowledge with modern practices, working closely with National Park Services and other partners to ensure our youth are equipped to become the next generation of environmental leaders. At the heart of our mission is the belief that Indigenous-led solutions and community voices are key to driving meaningful change and lasting change. Kind of woven into this topic, I solely believe that the issues that we face across the Indian country, us as Indigenous people, us as Indigenous leaders, us as Indigenous women, have the expertise, the education, the lived experiences to lead on the issues that impact us. And so this is very important to state, because most of us here on my panel, my fellow colleagues on this panel, as fellow nonprofit leaders, women nonprofit leaders, nonprofits, some more statistics for you. Nonprofits are the least funded in the nonprofit sector. Native American nonprofits not only have to, seek after funding, but we have to be in competition with other Native American centered organizations that are not Native led. So this is also very important when we talk about receiving equal pay, receiving the correct and equitable funding. A lot of us started our work very on a grassroots level, utilizing our own funding to seek out the change that we want to see, not only in our tribal community, but also, across Indian country. So it's very important when we talk about equity that we also weave in the importance of equal funding, especially for Indigenous women, Native-led nonprofits. So to, kind of focus on the question that I'm here to speak about, the equal pay for Native women is something that I've been advocating for a very long time. As you mentioned, there's a lot of different federal legislations that will help increase the pay, speak to some of the legislation to help women take leave and have paid time leave off. But what's also very important to understand is some of the statistics, and I'm not going to reiterate some of the statistics that Gina stated, but as Native women, we do suffer the highest crimes of violence in this country. So this is something that I always say. I speak before you today, a full-blooded Indigenous woman, and the statistics that hang over my head is that I am the most stalked, raped, murdered, exploited, and we suffer domestic violence 50 times higher than a national average. Our murder rate is 10 times higher than a national average compared to other ethnicities in our country. And so when you look at that, when you look at these statistics, and that we suffer the highest rates in violence, you would imagine for those who have suffered rape and domestic violence and sexual assault and human trafficking, if these women are in a pathway to journey to get onto healing, reestablishment, becoming independent, maybe they have left their abusers, they don't have a fair share of receiving equal pay, because even if you seek out higher education, we look at some of the pay gap statistics that are out there. Even if you seek out for a bachelor's or a doctorate's degree, you will see that the pay gap is even increased in those regions or in those areas. So it's so very hard for Indigenous women. Not only are we the most violent crime, we suffer the most violent crime, but we also suffer the lowest pay. And most people believe that, oh, well, it's your own people committing these violent crimes to Native women. No, actually, 70% to 90% from various, I'm taking this from various statistics, but this is, I'm quoting a DOJ statistic here. 90% of violent crime against Indigenous women are from non-Native perpetrators. So not only are we in a crisis with the MMIWR movement, but we're also in a crisis for us to receive equal pay. And for survivors and victims, we're in a crisis of providing them a safe pathway to healing and sustainability. Some of the statistics that is out there from Lean In, and I can definitely drop this in the chat. But we see they compare some of the tribes in the southwestern region, the Pacific Northwest region, the Northern Plains region, and they take the tribes in these areas, and they see the pay gaps in these regions. And I would say, for the most part, a lot of these tribes that has been able to have been researched, we're still in the 48%, some in the 50% region, but we see some of the mid, I would say, maybe the woodland tribes, some of them have the probably the least of the pay gap, meaning they're in the 20 or 30% percentile. It doesn't make it any different. They're still suffering a pay gap. However, even from tribe to tribe and region to region, we see that the pay gap is impacting Indigenous women everywhere from East Coast to South, East Coast to West, and South to North. So this draws a picture and a conclusion that no matter where you are as an Indigenous woman, even if it's on the reservation or in a urban region, we are still suffering significantly as far as pay equity goes in a salary. And for those of us, I always say this as well. If anybody out there knows a Native American colleague or friend, I don't know any Native American person that I know that does not have a family member or someone in their circle or a friend that has fallen victim to missing, murdered, or exploitation. So when we talk about the violent crimes, we also have to talk about the equity pay. And this is why this is so important to talk about.
Well, well, thank you. Thank you, Lynette. I mean, this is incredibly difficult, but so important. I had the privilege of running a domestic violence organization before I was here, and the cycle of financial abuse and lack of equal pay means that people cannot escape from that violence. And so these are inextricably linked, and we're grateful that you and other panelists today are examining and shining light on that connection. Well, I want to turn to Vernell next. I'm hoping, Vernell, you can talk again a little bit about your work, your organization, and then continuing on this theme, maybe you could talk a little bit about what are the long-term effects of this unequal pay on Native women, and what strategies can be implemented to begin combating some of those effects.
Thank you, Deborah. Pinamia, Woogenicha, Honachande Washteno Hopelo. My name is Vernell Chase, yellow hair woman. I am an enrolled member of the Gros Ventre tribe from Fort Belknap, Montana, and I'm also of Assiniboine and Mandan descent. I was born and raised on the Fort Belknap Reservation. Very proud to have worked and amongst our community. And there was one thing that we were raised with. By our mother, and a nation is not conquered until the hearts of the women are on the ground. And we spent a lot of time within our community, so I have vast experience from a youth to today in advocacy for women's rights, women equal pay, and being a proponent of getting to the table, getting to policy. As you can see, I'm not an identifiable Native American woman. I am a Saginaw. I am a half. Growing up, we were taught that each and every one of us have a role to get to the table. There's a role for each and every one of us for advocacy for our people, whether that's at policy, the individuals and working in our fields, but in the top of our market sectors, but ultimately continuing to work towards a better environment for our women and to leave the ladder down for those that are coming behind us and to offer a hand up. And so with that philosophy, we look at our long-term effects. And first and foremost, I want to thank my colleagues that are on this panel with me, who have dedicated their lives and their careers to advocate and fight for equal pay, equal rights, and attention to the disparities, as well the atrocities that are on not only our lands, sovereign lands, but are in the urban settings where our people are housed and where we live. Our numbers are staggering. I won't go down the path and repeat those, but I do ask that you research our history, research where we're at, who have been on this journey of women's equal pay, such as Susan B. Anthony, JFK, and where the attention began to lie, so that we understand where we've come from and the work that still needs to be done. Education is a huge proponent for combating the pay disparities and where we're at today, understanding where we should be, understanding in our market sectors, in collaboration with partners across the board. There's individuals that have been on this journey and fighting and bringing attention to this wage gap. And we do not have to recreate the wheel, but we can join and advocate and join and combine our resources to bring the attention and to fight and provide services, both boots on the ground, as well as in other areas, to assist in continuing to grow and build this market for not only attention, but the strategies. and implementing the strategies to combat where we're at today. Some of the long-term consequences of unequal pay, I'm just going to top high level and more focused on the strategies to combat. But economic insecurity is a long-term consequence of unequal pay, such as, and as well as educational disparities, financial constraints stemming from unequal pay and results of lower education attainment levels among our Native American women. Families may prioritize immediate financial needs over long-term educational aspirations, therefore perpetuating the cycles of poverty that restrict our career advancements and opportunities. Coming from the construction industry, I'm a 30-year employee of Flintco, and there was a time in my career when I had to decide between my family and my career. Being who I am, I decided I was going to take on both. And living under those constraints and the wage gap between me and my traditional American businessmen and where that's at today. And it took me 25 years to have the courage to stand up and voice and address that pay gap. And I didn't address that pay gap until my children were out of high school and graduated. I didn't feel confident in taking that risk until I felt like they were secured and on their own path. And so these are the type of things that we face as head of households. 2 out of 3 of our households are ran by women. Some of the other long-term effects are health implications, community impact, intergenerational effects. But some of the strategies to combat are unequal pay. As I had mentioned, policy advocacy. It's crucial to advocate for robust legislation aimed at closing the wage gap. We have white papers that are out there. We highly encourage you to reach out to your congressmen, your municipalities, and get to the table to understand where they're at. Be a part of the voice that helps to write and update the policies that address this gap. It's crucial to understand where we're at. And where we should be in order to be able to bridge that gap. Understanding that it takes a lot of courage to get to that point, but by collaborating with individuals that have been on this journey, it helps to bridge that gap, and so that we can immediately jump in and be advocates for our partners in these areas. Education and training programs, a huge advocate for education and training programs. Support for small businesses, how we can collaborate. And through Native Women Lead, this is a huge piece that we have formed together, because as Native Women Lead, I apologize, I really didn't focus much on our services and what we provide in our community. We provide entrepreneurial wraparound services. We create opportunities for Indigenous entrepreneurs, and we received a large fund that has been able to allow us to demonstrate that Indigenous female entrepreneurs are investable. And we are 3 years into a 5-year award that is focused on this, on providing opportunities as well as resources for our Indigenous female entrepreneurs. I do ask that those that are in attendance to please look at our website. We're about ready to launch another fund for wraparound services for progressive businesses. We have been focused on startup as well as micro lending. Now we're into their next phase, but that helps us to provide opportunities and funding for such advocacy as workforce diversity initiatives, as well as community support networks, awareness campaigns, research and data collection, huge in the resource and data collection. Native Women Lead has invested in this area as part of our advocacy work and helping to support and fund those that are in the trenches in this area, because our focus is entrepreneurs, but we understand the systematic challenges that prohibit our women from being entrepreneurs immediately, balancing working for an employer and in order to keep the lights on, keep the family going, keeping the roof over the head, versus feeling our passion and pursuing what we have identified as a niche and how we can serve our communities through being business people. Second area, or excuse me, the 8th area in respect to combating the long-term effects of unequal pay for Indigenous women is collaboration with organizations. In the for-profit market, the unions are a huge piece for us in the construction industry and in fighting for advocacy and equal pay. And not only equal pay, but equal distribution of work, as well as opportunity for overtime and growth in within organizations. So highly encourage looking into your market sector for organizations that advocate or understand where we should be or what needs to be gapped, and becoming a part of those organizations in order to move that meter a little further down the road. By tackling the root causes of wage disparities and implementing targeted strategies, it is possible to combat the long-term effects of unequal pay for Native American women and promote greater economic equity and social justice in our communities. One thing that we have noticed in this journey that I have been on as the interim executive director to Native Women Lead is that money comes with an energy. There's an energy behind money, and it could be good and bad, but many of the challenges that we faced as a nonprofit organization that received a large sum of money was the energy of that and how individuals showed up for conflict resolution. And the reason I mention this is this does bleed over into other areas where we're advocating for equal pay. As Indigenous women, we're humble individuals. We work hard, we do the work. It's expected that we will be compensated for that. You've invited me to the table. I shouldn't have to beg for my meal, is the concept that I've thought about for years and years and years. And being humble, going back in and out of the worlds where we go and serve in our communities and we serve in the things that we do within our communities, it's a beautiful balance. But there is a challenge of crossing back into the colonized world where we have to step up amongst our colleagues and have that courage to advocate for ourselves and to accept that, yes, I am just as equal as my colleagues and I deserve that rate of pay. I shouldn't have to ask for it, but understanding that we do, that advocacy is still needed. We do need to look out for our colleagues and our fellow members in this arena. So with that, there's still many challenges, but I ask that the attendees on this webinar reach out and talk to the specialists, Miss Ruth Ann Buffalo, Miss Lynette Grable, Gina Jackson, Charlotte Gonzalez, each of these individuals, and we're spread out throughout the United States. We have the heart and the passion to continue to take on this issue and to bridge the gap between our wages, but we do need individuals in all different areas. We need you to reaching out to your legislators, reaching out to your politicians and making our voices be heard. And there's times when you do need to take a knee. Take that knee, dust yourself off and jump back into it and bring others into and educate others amongst our peers. Our young voices, our young women have voices that are beautiful and they're powerful. Give them the tools to help and to be advocates and hand that torch off. To those that are listening and where to go, reach out to these beautiful individuals that have dedicated their lives and careers and the things that have happened to us, that have traumatized us, that have kept us at times from being advocates for ourselves. They're still there, but let's minimize those and heal and learn how to collaborate and be stronger in numbers amongst each other, and to no longer look at this as something that's keeping us back, but to empower us to have a stronger voice and to, because we're already working twice as hard. We're already covering all of the other things, but owning that and embracing it and channeling that into being unstoppable. And I'll pause there for my other colleagues, but I do ask that you look into their organizations and please consider supporting them. We are underserved financially, we're underserved in relationships, and we're on the path to creating those professional networks that help our colleagues, our sisters, those that are in this world with us. But we need to continue to build and grow that network. From me to you, happy holidays, and wishing each and every one of you peace, love at this time of year, and recharge and restoration as we go into the winter solstice, because this next year we're needed. Everything that happened this last month, this last 45 days, is the recognition and the realization that it's individuals like us that are on this panel, as well as that are attending this webinar. We care and we're ready to take action, and we're needed more than ever in my career than I feel than I've ever been needed. So to each and every one of you, strength and prosperity.
Thank you, Vernell. That's really inspiring. Sorry about this light on my face. We love your passion, and you've articulated so much, but one of it is this real scarcity model that unfortunately so many organizations have to operate under, which is entirely unfair. We have dropped into the chat information about each of these organizations. We will also follow up afterwards with all registrants to make sure you have information so that you can check out their work and donate. And I'll also talk about that right at the very end. But I want to make sure we turn to another one of our incredible panelists. So Ruth, you got a shout out. You're amazing. I'm hoping, again, you could talk a little bit about your organization and then also the connection between your clients, your unsheltered clients, and the importance of economic security and financial literacy, that sort of cycle that we talked about before of financial abuse.
Sure. Dosha, hello, and Madzigidads, thank you for having me. Nidoshadzi Nakbaga O Madashi Mia Adasheds, Madashi Ruth Madegadi Heads, Mabi Sigids Madzigidads Nakbaga O. I'm Ruth Anna Buffalo. I carry my late grandmother Ruth, her Hidadza name, and it's like, whoa, I'm starting to feel emotional. Even just yeah, it's good to be in this space with all of you. And, you know, I'm an enrolled citizen of the Mandan Hidadza and Arikara Nation. My dad is Chiricahua Apache. I'm a member of the Awache clan, which is dripping earth or dripping dirt. My late grandmother Ruth is a child of the Waterbuster clan, and my mom is a child of the Flint Knife clan. And I'm dialing in from Minnesota, or Minneapolis, Minnesota. We're in the heart of the East Phillips neighborhood, South Minneapolis, not far from the Native Corridor. So we're MIWRC, Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center, is located between Lake Street and Franklin Avenue. We're right off of Bloomington Avenue. And so I've been here since March 4th of 2024. And definitely hit the ground running in a dead sprint. But I'm enjoying my time here. There's so much needed work that that so many beautiful people are coming together to address the gaps within our systems, of course. But listening to all of you speak has really been inspirational, and a lot of things come to mind. In particular, you know, just thinking, you know, how did we get to where we are today? How and why, you know, how do we better understand the conditions that we're in? And how do we articulate this to our allies who can help or who have access to certain spaces that we might not be able to, because sometimes the messenger does matter, you know. And so how do we all continue to work together to be good relatives, to uplift one another, and to stay true to our values as you know, Hidadza Mandan, Apache women, or, you know, indigenous women, tribal women. And I was thinking of like the colonization, or where did the disconnect happen? Because it seems, you know, broadly speaking, you know, not to paint everyone with a broad stroke, but, you know, coming from a matriarchal, matrilineal people, and sometimes over time it's gotten maybe watered down, or some tribes have shifted to more of a patriarchal approach. And so how do we stay true to our values? And it's a heavy topic, you know, to have to think of the grandmas that we weren't able to meet, or the great grandmas. And so, yeah, and so on and so forth. But it's, sorry, I need to get to, so just thinking of, you know, our ancestors and why we do the work we do. And so it's so important. Sorry, did not plan for this, but it's just so important for us to be good to one another, because we know the struggles, you know, we face them, in whether it's amongst our own people, whether it's, you know, on the outside. And so how do we stay true to our values of being good relatives, good ancestors? Everything is connected. whether it's, economically, and so what we do at Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center is we strive to take care of one another, be good relatives. Everything is culturally grounded in our spirituality. Super thankful that we have a sweat lodge on site, just out right here in our backyard, so to speak, in an urban setting. We have a sweat lodge. And we had one of our Native women relatives share with us the other day that she's so thankful. Like, she never imagined she would be in a sweat lodge feeling so safe and secure in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the United States, in South Minneapolis, where crime is high, where, you're one paycheck away from being unhoused in South Minneapolis as a Native person. And so there's so much that needs to be addressed and worked on, but we need each other. We got to continue to be good relatives to one another, because we know that chronic illness and disease is directly linked to chronic stress. And unfortunately, as Native people, our population, we have historically low life expectancies. And for various reasons, whether it's, like our sister Lynette mentioned, in some counties in the United States, our Native women are 10 times more likely to be murdered, to die from homicide. And aside from, the blatant violence, there's so many other levels of violence that we unfortunately face on a daily basis. Native women are known to be oftentimes the breadwinners of their family, or sometimes maybe even the first to go to college, or the first to earn a doctorate degree or a law degree, or be in a leading an organization capacity role. You face different challenges, and so that's really what's on my heart and mind today is being good relatives. How can we alleviate some of the stress, the daily stress, the ongoing stress that we already face in these different positions, and trying to find equity, trying to make sure our voices are heard. We're still at the bottom of the barrel in terms of native wages in our own country. These are our original lands. We are born into this unique political relationship with the United States federal government. Therefore, we have this unique status. Oftentimes when we're lumped into the demographics of race with other races, we are erased, and so there's so much education that needs to take place. But I think at the heart of it, for me, it's really staying true to our values of Native women, thinking of our grandmas, our great grandmas that we didn't get to meet, that were sent to boarding schools, that were stolen from their families, and we're dealing with the aftermath today. But we're still here, as Gina said. We have our future generations coming up, and they're watching us, and they're seeing how are we treating one another, but ultimately too, how are we treating ourselves? How are we being good to ourselves, and demanding the justice and respect in the name of our ancestors, our grandmothers. So at Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center, we have a lot of programs. We offer direct services. Our website is miwrc.org. As Deborah mentioned, we serve our unsheltered relatives on a daily basis. We have many different points of entry to receive services of care in-house underneath the MIWRC umbrella. Of course, we partner with many different community organizations. We have the drop-in center where unsheltered relatives can come in and get a shower. They can get a warm meal. They can sleep, because a lot of our unsheltered women stay up all night on the streets for their own safety, watching out for one another. And then they're tired by the time our doors open. So in the past, we were 24 hours. So we're working on meeting the needs of our community. Financial literacy, is all encompassing, whether it's, for our unsheltered relatives, whether it's for our staff here at MIWRC who are living paycheck to paycheck. I think one of our values, or it's of our nature to be so giving people, much to our detriment of, the taking of our land, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But, growing up, we were never really taught to save. We were always taught, if you had extra money, you give away, you help each other out, so we're, a part of the diagram shift in the narrative of, money. Talking about money is a little different, even though, like, I come from a people that did, at one time run one of the largest trade centers in North America, what is in present day Bismarck, Mandan, located on the Missouri River. Although then years later, Also with the largest trade center, though, came, smallpox, where our Mandan tribe, the Nueta, as Vernell mentioned, we were almost wiped out by smallpox. So just kind of interweaving a lot of different, history that's a part of who we are. But, years later, flooding of 94% of our agricultural land for the making of the Garrison Dam as a result of the Pick-Sloan Act, a federal piece of legislation where it completely disenfranchised our community once again, where many people utilized the relocation programs and went, to large metro areas, but many people, including my grandparents, chose to stay. But as a result, they faced issues when they tried to pull themselves up by the bootstraps, so to speak, and find work off the reservation after 94% of their agricultural land was flooded for the making of the Garrison Dam, which, it's in short, being historically agricultural peoples, that was a huge impact and completely fragmented our communities from one central location to 6 different communities. And so my grandpa, had tried to find work off the reservation, but was met with discrimination in border towns and so on and so forth, but I don't want to take up too much airtime. It's all encompassing. I'm super proud to be working here at MIWRC. We do a lot of prevention of MMIR, MMIW, MMIP without really, saying it, because, at the heart of everything, it's how do we take care of one another? How do we get back to our ancestral values of being good relatives and making sure our families are intact? We have family services that advocates in the court for ICWA. We have an ICWA liaison, we have kinship care workers. A lot of our grandparents are raising grandchildren and great-grandchildren. We have a learning center that provides training to non-Native professionals who serve Native clients. We have Nujimo, which means she heals in the Ojibwe language, that serves sexual assault, domestic violence, human trafficking. We have Section 8 housing HUD. The top 2 floors of MIWRC are being renovated right now. We're moving from 14 units to 24 units. And this is emergency supportive housing for our unsheltered relatives that will be opening July of 2025. We're bringing back our mental health services. So there's a lot of moving pieces, but we can't do it by ourselves. We got to, for sure, lean on one another and above all else, be good to one another. Madzigidads Nakbaga'o. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. First of all, thank you. And thank you for sharing and being so vulnerable. And I hate that we are rushing through such important words and such wisdom, and we would have, each person could have hours. So I apologize for that. We're gonna turn to our last speaker, Charlotte, and then we're gonna do a really quick lightning round to get in one more question, because I know our audience wants to hear a little bit more from everyone, and we'll take 30 seconds or so for that last question. But before we do, Charlotte, if you could tell us a little bit more about your organization. We've heard people talking about data, right? The importance of data sovereignty. I know you want to talk a little bit about financial abuse and how it impacts survivors and their need for financial independence. So let me turn it over to you for 5 minutes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Deborah. And I just want to give a big thank you to Equal Pay Today for just creating this webinar, because I truly believe information is power. And when people are informed, they really just are able to act in the way that they need to be. And I also want to thank our panelists for creating some really great presentations, really just laying the groundwork for where all this comes from. So I'm from the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director. And so the mission of the CSVNW is to eradicate violence against Native women and children by championing social change within our communities. We're dedicated to taking responsibility for the future well-being of Native women and children through the pillars of support, education, and advocacy. We leverage our collective strength, power, and unity towards the creation of violence-free communities. And so I'm just going to name some of our values that we have that I feel like are really, they just remind me deeply of just how culturally rooted we are, and just reminding us every day in the work that we do, like where we come from. So our first one is culture, of course. Our second one is kinship. Our third is innovation. Our fourth is healing. And fifth is inclusiveness. So the history of this organization began in 1995 by 3 founding Native women: Peggy Bird, who is from Kiowa Pueblo; Darlene Coria from Laguna Pueblo; Jean James from Navajo country. The Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women was created to provide support to other Native advocates working in domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, stalking, sex trafficking in New Mexico tribal communities. The single goal is to eliminate violence against Native women and children. So these women really just got together to bridge the gap that they saw in our communities here in New Mexico with our tribal communities, that there's a lot of violence happening and that there needed to be something done. So over 2 decades later, CSVNW continues to be a resource for training, advocate support, technical assistance, and policy and advocacy. CSVNW has also aided in support of collaborations with tribal leadership to further develop and promote tribal, federal, state, and local legislation and policies that cultivate best practices for responding to violent crimes against Native women and children. And so, like I said, I think that our panelists did a really great job of kind of just laying the groundwork about where kind of all of this stems from. And I always kind of like to reference our one of our slogans with violence is not our tradition. And I truly believe the inequity and the inequality of pay for women, for Native women, is an extension of that violence. And so just talking about data sovereignty and how it links with financial abuse. Data sovereignty basically is the, data sovereignty refers to the principles that individuals or nations have the right to control their own data and determine how and where it is stored, accessed, and used. In this case of domestic violence, perpetrators often exert control over their victims' personal data as a means of manipulation, surveillance, and coercion. Financial abuse is a common form of DV where the abuser controls the victim's financial resources, often by accessing bank accounts, credit cards, and other financial assets. In this digital age, the control often extends to the victim's personal data, including like online banking and shopping accounts, passwords, and other digital resources. So when we think about just, equal pay and how, like we talked about the statistics of Native women really kind of just being thought about last, this really brings up important things to think about for our Native survivors who are in domestic violence situations and are needing aid. Native women are already not making as much money as per se the white man, not even as much as their Native man counterparts either. So when we think about data sovereignty and financial abuse, Native women really are at a very big disadvantage with protecting themselves and also just gaining that equality in the first place. And so when we think about financial abuse and data sovereignty, we're really talking about giving the power back to women. And what does that mean? So I think, being a survivor leaving dangerous situation costs money. Breaking leases, childcare, new phone plans, transportation, lawyer fees, this all costs money. And so we see a lot in our work that Native women are needing a lot more support. And so when one of our panelists talked about how we are at a disadvantage as Native nonprofits or Native-led nonprofits, this directly affects that. And we see that with our victims. So guaranteed paid time off jobs ensure that jobs have living wages and PTO. So we're just thinking about how can we really alleviate some of this for our Native victims and Native communities. And so really what we work in is we have a training and education department. We have our policy and advocacy department, which is mine. And so our training and education department really works on preventative and educational initiatives for our Native communities to really be informed about what they can do in their situations. And so we really just try to push for our Native communities to, like you said, be a part of the conversation when policies are being made. Deborah definitely talked about some good ones that'll definitely be proposed. And so really, I think for our organization, what I think about for Native Women Equal Pay Today, it's just informing our Native communities about what they have access to and what they don't have access to, and then just kind of helping them to make those conscious financial decisions about that. But I know that we only have a little bit of time, so I'll just stop it there. And I just want to thank you all again.
Thank you, Charlotte. I'm so sorry to cut anything you have to say short. We are scheduled to end on the hour. So in 1 minute, I'm going to ask the audience. I know we'll see people drop off. We will follow up post-webinar with a link and more information. I'll ask if people could stay on, 3-4 more minutes. I'm going to do a lightning round with all of our panelists. If we get everyone up on the screen, and let's do that really, really quickly. Oh, thanks the ERA team for doing that. So we're going to wrap up. Let me ask you, we'll go around in the same order that people did their first question. So we'll start with Gina. If someone were to ask you what they could do to help, what would you tell them? And how can they get involved on pay equity issues for Native women? So everyone take like 30 seconds, we'll go around.
Yes. I think a lot of people feel like, well, what can I do? I'm just one person. Well, times 334 million here in the US. If we value the tenets of justice, of equity that we, hold as a foundation in this country and include specifically and value Native women, we can change that.
Wonderful. Lynette.
Yes, really quickly. I think that I get this a lot, but from our non-native relatives, they ask how they can help. They ask how they can support. Like I mentioned in my statement, Native-led and women-led nonprofits are the least funded in the nonprofit sector. If you really want to help, fund one of us, donate one of us. If you don't have the funds, share our mission. Share your mission with your family, with your network at your jobs. Fundraise. However, but because of that, we can change being the least funded simply by donating. This helps our work. This helps advances our work. There's a lot of across the nation. We talked a lot about MMIW, but there's no federal or state entity that funds supporting MMIW families. So my organization, I know there's a handful of others that support financial support to MMIP families impacted by MMIW. I mean, there's so many other things that we can go down the road to talk about, but I would say the number one thing, if you want to be a good relative, you want to be a good ally, share our mission and donate.
Thank you. I'm going to say that too after everyone wraps up. Vernell.
Exactly. I'll just voice the same as financial contribution is always needed. Pick an organization that is close to your heart and work with them. Every person counts, every action counts. But also to our entrepreneurs out there, look at your HR policies, ensure that they're where they need to be. And if they are, share those, reach out, touch base with your industry, ensure that you are competitive, because also, man, now's a day. Go ahead and take that chance and move on to another organization if you're not there. Look and ensure that you're truly being compensated. But I reach out to our entrepreneurs and sharing your HR policies and be a leader within our own small businesses. And it does take more, but we're worth it. And that loyalty from our employees, if we're paying equal, I guarantee you we'll pay back hundredfold to you and your anticipated outcome.
Thank you, Vernell. Ruth, and then Charlotte, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, it would echo everybody's words. Just ask the tough questions, even though it might not be a tough question, but be curious, ask questions, have those kitchen table conversations in your respective networks, to help change the narrative and center our voices, center, the family's voices. So I would encourage everybody to have, respectful, constructive dialogue and conversations within each of your networks. And ask those questions. Madzigadads, thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree with everybody here. I think that when it comes to what can you do, we literally carry computers in our pockets. And so I truly support everybody informing themselves, everybody taking the initiative to inform yourself about these issues, specifically ones that maybe doesn't pertain to you, are super important, because this is an issue, one that can't change unless everybody views it as a problem. Thank you.
Great. Wow. That was a lightning round. So I just want to say thank you to this very powerful panel. You all are so amazing and so generous of your time and your wisdom. It has been a pleasure learning with and learning from you. And as a campaign, Equal Pay Today, we must be resolute in our commitment to addressing both the gender and race-based wage gaps and all the disparities that we've talked about, which are beyond just equal pay by Native communities and all year round, heeding the voices of leadership of Native communities, respecting sovereignty, traditions, and cultural practices, and making the workplace and economic justice policies we talked about, like equal pay and paid leave, a priority. Thank you again to the panelists for being leaders for the Native Women's Equal Pay Day this year. For our audience, you heard it. This week was Giving Tuesday, this past Tuesday, but it is never too late to help these organizations work. I hope folks will check out the websites of these, the organizations with the links that we have dropped in the chat and consider getting involved, giving a gift. It's extremely important. We also talked about some federal solutions. We hope that you will check out the Equal Pay Today action page and make your voices heard. One of our panelists said we have to dust ourselves off and get up and keep up the fight because we're the ones who are going to do it. And then finally, my ERA colleagues have dropped a survey in the chat. We also hope you will check that out and tell us what you think about today's webinar. Minus this light, sorry about that. And we want to just thank all of you for joining us, and we're going to say goodbye. So thank you, everyone.